Hey YouTube, Captain Marc here from Kings Landing Sport Fishing. I've recently had some questions about how I set up my downrigger rods. I've had questions about what line test I run on my rods, how I avoid line twist, what rods and reels I use. So I figured I can do a series of videos over the next little while that go over some of my rod setups. And today's video is my first one in that series. That is how I set up my downrigger rods. And I actually set up my downrigger rods 3 different ways. So today I'm going to cover the 3 different ways I set up my downrigger rods and why I set them up these 3 different ways depending on the type of fishing I'm doing or tactic I'm using. Before I do show you that though, if you like my video and you like my channels, if you can click on the like button and subscribe to my channel, that would be fantastic. So with that, let's dive in and show you method number 1. The first method I'm going to show you is the method I use when running any flasher. So I'll start by saying I run the Streamside TSR 862 Predator downrigger rod. And I combine that with a Shimano Tekota 700 reel filled with, in this case, Berkeley Pro Spec 40-pound fishing line. When I'm running a flasher, I run the heavier fishing line. This is not a very stealth presentation. I do like to run the 40-pound. That's one of the reasons why I'm running a 700 Tekota, because I can still fit about 325 yards of line on this. So I'm getting close to 1,000 feet of line on that 700. And it works great. Why I like the 40-pound is for a few reasons. First of all, on Lake Ontario, we do get the spiny water fleas. And the spiny water fleas are much easier to remove when they get on the thicker line, like a 40-pound test, versus like a 20 or 25-pound test. So that's the first reason. The second reason is, running a charter boat, I get some folks in the boat that are not seasoned fishermen. And there'll be many times where they kind of lose a bit of control of that fish behind the boat. And next thing you know, that the line is in a wire diver, or maybe it's getting close to the downrigger cable, and the 40-pound test just holds up much better versus a much thinner line that will break off super easy. So that's another reason I use the 40-pound. When it comes to the swivels, I use a bit of an interesting setup here, and it's something I learned when I was fishing out west in Vancouver. And what you'll see here is I use a combination of a 6-ball bead swivel with a ball bearing number 6 ball bearing swivel with a clasp on it. And then I have a bead here. And this bead is actually a soft bead. It's a rubber bead, so it squishes. And I have that on there so that when I have a client on the boat, if they start to wind, if they try to wind, all the way to the point where you're winding the swivel through the eyelet, this bead will stop it and protect your eyelets. So that's the setup I use. But what I'll share with you is a bit of a close-up of the parts. So what you'll see here is, these are the parts I use. So you have to buy these separately. So you've got your bead. Like I said, I'm using a bit of a rubber bead so it squishes. I've got my 6-ball chain swivel. I've got a number 5 split ring. And then I've got my swivel with a clasp. And this is a number 6. And that's the setup I run on this rod. And the reason why I run this setup is for a few reasons. First of all, on Lake Ontario, it's quite common, especially I'd say in the spring and early season, we get a lot of garbage in the lake. You've got a lot of weeds, you've got algae, you've got debris from the winter, and it can get caught on your swivel. And the last thing I want is it to get caught on the swivel, if I'm only running a singular swivel, and I get all kinds of crazy line twist. Plus, we're running some pretty huge flashers on Lake Ontario. We're running large 11-inch flashers like this, or Okie Kingfishers, and they have a lot of action, and it often twists the line. And by running that 6-ball swivel, no more line twists. You've got the 6-ball plus the ball bearing. It really does its job. So that's how I set up my downrigger rods when I'm running with flashers on the boat. Method number 2 is how I set up my rods when I'm running spoons. So I'm running that same Streamside Predator TSR 862 rod, but what I've done here now is I've paired that up with a Shimano 600 Tekota. It's a smaller reel, and the reason being is I'm not running a thick line. So while this does say 20-pound spoon, the way I've got this rod set up is I've got a 25-pound test monofilament, and then in the final 40-50 feet, I've put on 20-pound fluorocarbon. And that because this is my stealth rig. And I've basically then tied this up and terminated it with a small torpedo swivel with clasp. And that's how I've got this rod set up for running spoons. It's a pretty simple setup, but by running the 25-pound line with a 20-pound leader, I can get about 250 yards, so call it 750, 800 feet of line on this reel on a 600 series. So it's a fantastic setup. Runs a smaller reel, so there's not as much weight on this rod, but it has that stealth presentation when running a spoon. It's a pretty simple setup, but that's how I set up my downrigger rods when I'm running a spoon program. I don't like running the spoons on that other setup with the thicker line. I find that 40-pound test really takes away from the action of the spoon, and that's why I have that 40, 50 feet at the end here of 20-pound fluorocarbon, because I want the most action on my spoons. The third setup I'm going to show you today is a setup I use when I'm fishing deep, typically 125 feet or lower. I'm running that same Streamside TSR 862 rod with a Shimano 600 reel. But on this reel, what I've done is I've actually got 50-pound braid. And then at the end of the 50-pound braid, I've attached a section of around 30 feet of monofilament. In this particular case, I've got 40-pound on there. And this is a setup I use when I'm fishing deep, running usually large paddles like a Oki Kingfisher or an 11-inch paddle. And I have it terminated with that same setup with a 6-ball with a ball bearing swivel clasp. And why I use this braid setup when fishing deep is, if I was to use monofilament fishing deep, I'll get this big bow in the line as I crank down that downrigger rod. And when a fish hits that deep rod, there's a lot of slack that suddenly gets created. And now it's like a mad dash to reel in that slack. I know you'll often lose fish because of that. Running the braid setup, I can really minimize and eliminate most of that bow in the line. I run a Black's release clip. I'll have it cranked down pretty tight on the deep rod, and I can get almost all the slack out of the line with this braid setup. The reason why I still want a little bit of monofilament on here is I do want a bit of stretch somewhere. Otherwise, I run the risk of ripping the hook out of the fish's mouth, and that's what the 30 feet of monofilament is. I'll put the monofilament in the downrigger clip, and then it's basically the braid from the downrigger clip to the rod. It works great for those deep fish. I find I don't lose as many fish with this particular setup. The other rods I showed you today, I have 2 of each of those on my boat. When it comes to this particular setup, I'll typically only have 1. Because I'll only run 1 rod down 150 feet or deeper on most occasions. But I find we don't lose as many fish with this setup, and it's pretty simple. 50-pound braid with a section of whatever your favorite monofilament is when running, whether it be a flasher or whatever. I hope you found this video useful as to what I'm using when it comes to rods, reels, and the various different line, and why I run different setups depending on what the style of fishing I'm doing at that time. If you like my channel and you find this video of value, please do me a favor, click the like button and click on that subscribe button, and I wish you all the best on the water in 2021. Have a great day.